All right, we ready to rock?
Very, very soon.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. I'd like to call to order the Finance Committee meeting of Tuesday, April 22nd, 2025. It is 1:01 p.m. and we are live on a digital platform. We have 5 items on today's agenda, including any related items, and consequently, a whole bunch of folks here. I guess I'll call the roll here quickly. And if I miss people, please, by all means, holler. Um, I've got Peg Woodring here from the Controller's Office, Melanie Shutt here from the Grants Department, Scott Williams, Valerie Fessler from Community Development, as well as Jamie Schroeder here from CEDACOG, associated with the Community Development item. We've got Eric Biter, Randy Allison, and myself, Liz Mealy here from City Council, Mayor Derek Slaughter, Bill Scott here, the City Engineer, Jamie Livermore from the Finance Department. Who did I miss? I apologize. If I missed, anyway, we'll go ahead and kick stuff off here.
Claire Collins is here from
Oh, I'm
UH.
sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. I had a feeling I was missing somebody, but I was scanning up and down trying to read everybody. I apologize about that. Okay. We'll begin then with item number 1, an ordinance transfer ordinance number 2 in first reading. Jamie Livermore?
Good afternoon, everybody.
And I missed Janice Frank too. Janice, I'm sorry. And Chris Black. Anyway, thanks, Jamie.
Good afternoon. What you have in front of you is transfer ordinance number 2. This ordinance is to transfer 50,000 from the general fund line item called RVTA local share into the legislative contingency line item to increase the legislative and contingency line item budget from 75 to 125, with the intent to use these funds for part of the FTA payments that need to be made.
Okay. Understood. And I think that's a perfectly reasonable idea. We're transferring them into legislative contingency for a moment.
And then we'll pay the actual payments out of legislative contingency because the local share isn't a place where we would pay that payment from, but legislative contingency can have any kind of expenses paid from it. So it's a more logical line item to pay it from.
Got it. Okay. All right. Questions, Randy and Eric?
I don't have any.
Nor do I.
All right. Sounds good. That was short and sweet, Jamie. I don't have any real questions either. My only question was why, more or less, why it would need to be transferred into legislative contingency before being used for another purpose. But I see the logic there now. So, okay. All right. Then moving along on today's agenda, item number 2 is a resolution authorizing an addendum to a master services agreement with UHY Advisors. Derek?
Yes, good afternoon, Councilwoman Mealy, members of Finance. This is an addendum to the master services agreement with UHY. And Claire's here. This is, as we know, our ARPA money had to be allocated by December. It's got to be spent by 2026, December 31 of 26. So as we move forward, UHY's initial contract with us had expired, but this is just on an as-needed basis as the money that was allocated is starting to be spent. If we have any questions for UHY compliance related as far as to make sure as these organizations and the different areas that got the money start to spend it, if we have any questions, that's what this addendum is for. So it's simply on an as-needed basis. If we use UHY, if we don't use them, there's no financial implications for the city. We would only pay them if we use them. Claire and UHY, Jack, they've been fantastic throughout this process. And so we thought it was probably a good idea to keep them on until the end of the ARPA timeframe. So that's all this is the addendum to the original agreement, just continuing on for another 2 years, basically. And Claire's here as well, if you have any questions.
Yep. Hi, Claire.
Um,
Sorry for missing you there initially.
Uh,
Is there anything
Yeah,
else that you
Madam
want to
Chair,
say?
appreciate it.
Mhm.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that it's not adding any funds to the existing contract. These are funds, these are ARPA funds that were already designated. What we've been pretty much doing on a monthly basis since all your funds were obligated, ARPA funds obligated, is reviewing the land bank and the RDA, Redevelopment Authority invoicing to ensure that it meets the agreement and meets all the ARPA requirements. So it's a very limited amount of time. Plus, Jamie or Melanie may reach out with any questions, anything that's with regard to the quarterly reporting that needs to be addressed, or like specifically, like Jamie's reached out recently just with a couple questions on documentation. So basically, it's not the level of hours we were doing, so it would not increase any of the city's costs because those funds were already obligated through ARPA funding.
Got it. So basically, we had a 3-year agreement at 85,000, which would be 255 total. And you're saying we're still drawing down that initial sum of 255. We're not even going over that into funding. Great. Well, that's good to know. Derek, did you say that this should be running through the end of 26?
Well, I think we did a year agreement with this, I believe.
We did basically 9 months through the end of 25.
Yeah, so I think that's just the way we drew this up, but likely we will keep it going through the end of 26. I think Claire and we talked about that a little bit, and initially went through 25, but I think ultimately we do want it to go through 26. I think that would make sense. I think what we were thinking initially, and Claire, correct me if I'm wrong, was we would revisit again at the end of 25, and if we think we need to go through the end of 26, we would just re-up it done.
Okay.
Yeah, that was,
Mhm.
excuse me, sorry.
Sorry, Claire. No, go for it. What were you saying?
That's what we thought initially, and the issue would be is if we get close to the total 255, if there are some ARPA funds that aren't being spent that you can actually, that you've obligated elsewhere, you could transfer those. So we want to make sure we're keeping track of all the amounts that are being spent. So we didn't want to just say, and then have to open-ended come back and say, well, we need to, because of funds, we want to make sure we're within the existing contract amount.
Okay, got it. That explains. Randy, Eric, do you have any questions on this?
I don't. I guess everything's the same as far as hourly rates and everything like that. Yeah. No, I don't have any questions.
Yeah, those rates don't change. And so therefore what you've been paying, they remain the same
Okay.
as far as rates.
Thanks.
I don't have anything,
Mhm.
any question related to the contract. What I do have, and if you can answer this, fantastic. If not, I'll forgive you. The question I do have relates to the government trying to get back ARPA funds that have not been spent. Is there any word on what that process is going to potentially look like at this point in time?
Yes, we actually sat in on the Treasury webinars recently, and basically what Treasury is doing is there were a significant amount of local governments that did not obligate their funds by December 31st, 2024. And what they're going to do is they are the ones that they are going to initially be contacting to recoup those funds since they were not obligated. The city has obligated all their funds and you've been spending them down. I'm happy to say you've done a great job on your expense thus far. And so therefore the likelihood of any municipality like the city of Williamsport to actually have the federal government come after them for funds is probably unlikely. It's going to be those that probably have these strange, don't have contracts, don't have purchase orders, don't have agreements in place, and they're kind of didn't in their reporting. don't make sense. And then they're going to be reaching out to them to ask for questions and documentation, probably to the attempt will be to get those funds back. But we don't see that right now with the city, with how the city is reported. Treasury would have been back to you right by now with any of your reporting with questions, and you've done a really good job on reporting.
That answers my question. Thank you very much.
And that really good job on reporting is largely thanks to you, Claire and Jack. So we appreciate that. Thank you. For
And
keeping us
Valerie
on
and Valerie.
field.
And Valerie
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
Melanie, and also Jamie's played a role. I mean, we've all been what I call a team. It's been a real team approach and educating everybody. You know, it's an educational process for everybody.
Yeah, well, that's excellent. Well, we certainly have appreciated UHY's input and the hard work of the city staff as well. But this was an unlooked for. Well, you might not say benefit of COVID precisely, but anyway, it certainly was a boon to the city over the last handful of years. And I'm glad that we were able to make use of it, especially hearing that multiple municipalities may not have been able to make as efficient use of it. So that's good to know. If I hear no further questions, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. And thank you, Claire, for coming down today. We look forward to working with you for the rest of this year and probably the rest of 26 too. Thanks. If you guys have any insight, I think the last substantial chunk of ARPA funding that we have out there to be expended is with the RDA. So I do think that we should begin focusing on that in the hopes of getting all of that money expended before year end. So if you all have any insight on that, I think we would appreciate the benefit of it in terms of how we can most expediently get those funds spent down while meeting all the requirements and accomplishing the best, that we can for the city. There's certainly been a lot of conversation about it between council and the administration. So,
yeah, and we've been working with Skip, and we can actually, I think one of the things is providing the right level of guidance so that they can get it spent quickly. I think they got a slow start.
Yeah, that was sort of what we were saying. So, all right. Well, we hope that it'll pick up here. We can get it spent. Thank you, Claire. All right, moving on then to item number 3. It's a resolution for an MOU between the city and Lycoming College for crosswalks. Scott?
Good afternoon, Councilwoman Mealy. This is a resolution for an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding between the city and Lycoming College for crosswalks in the vicinity of the college. Give you a little background. We received an ARLI grant a few years ago before I was here, and we put out the bid last year for 6 crosswalks in the city. We didn't receive any bids for that, unfortunately. It's kind of a unique project and a small project. Nobody wanted to touch it at the time, I guess. Then just so happens President-to-be Chip Edmonds and the folks at Lycoming reached out to us about they had some needs for new crosswalks in the streets around the college. So Scott and I went up there and met with them, did some site visits, and they proposed to us they wanted to do 6 locations around the college. 4 are on Mulberry Street, one's on Washington Boulevard, and one's on Franklin Street for additional crosswalks. And they had proposed we kind of piggyback these, together, put these all out to bid together. It'll make a nicer project, a larger project. Hopefully we'll get some more interest from bidders, and we think we will. The purpose of the MOU is the college is willing to pay for the additional cost for design and construction of those 6 crosswalks that are around the college. So that's what that's about. Just wanted to add, you're probably aware of the new baseball field, the college, there in Brandon Park, it's being used a lot. There's a crossing right there at Elizabeth Street. It's kind of unsafe. Cars travel through there.
Just a little bit, Bill.
Yeah, and a lot of people were crossing there now to get up to the new baseball field. So that's a real need there. Put the crossing in there. We're also going to add some flashing beacon lights there. We think would be a good idea. So that's just one highlight of the other ones that we're doing around the college. That's pretty much what this is all about.
Mhm.
So yeah.
All right. Randy and Eric, do you guys have any questions on this?
Yeah, I only have one, but is that the only place on Elizabeth Street crosswalk? Is that the only one that's going to have lighting, flashing lights? Or?
Yeah, that's on one we're proposing beacons. The other
Okay.
ones are just new. It's thermoplastic crosswalks. They'll look like brick. They're not brick. It's thermoplastic. They're well seen. You can really see them. They stand out, which is the idea.
So then in the listed items 1 through 6, 6 says that following installation, the city will assume responsibility for the ongoing maintenance of that. Reads like all the crosswalks, then all 12 will be our responsibility.
Yes, that is how that's written, and that's the understanding.
Okay.
Regular maintenance for us, since we're in our streets.
Yeah. I assume that's not a huge expense.
No. These thermoplastic crosswalks, my experience has been they last for a while. They don't really need much upkeep.
Okay.
Great.
Great.
So I think that was the big question is, I'm assuming they're significantly more expensive to install, right? So
They're
will
not
we be on the hook?
compared to brick or concrete. No, these are less expensive actually.
But I mean, more expensive than, I'm assuming, are ours going to be thermoplastic as well?
Yes, they're all 12 of these will all be thermoplastic. That's the idea, to do a lump, here.
Because I was going to say, clearly it's cheaper to put a line on a street for a crosswalk, right, than to put it in thermoplastic.
Yeah, but they're not as visible. The idea is for visibility, which leads to safety.
Right.
These are very visible.
Okay.
With all the high pedestrian traffic areas is where this is going, around the college.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, no, I don't disagree with the idea that we need visible crosswalks. I was under the impression that Lycomings were a different material than the cities. In fact, I wasn't quite sure why we, right. But so I guess the question, probably part of your question, Randy, is are we paying to replace the thermoplastic in 10 years or so when it degrades? Are we assuming that level of responsibility for it, right? Was that the question, Randy?
Yes.
Well, the way it's written, yes, we are responsible for any future maintenance down the road, way down the road.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have a big issue with that. I consider it ideal that Lycoming College is paying for the installation, but you're right. We'll need to budget for it going forward. But yeah, Randy, where else did you want to go with that line of questioning there?
I'm good. Yeah.
Okay. Eric, anything from you?
Yeah, Scott, where were Bill, where were the proposed sites in the city?
So in the city, let's see here. I'll read them off to you. West 4th and Campbell Street, West 3rd and Campbell Street, West 3rd and Maynard, East 3rd and Mulberry, East 3rd and Basin and Via Bella. That's our city list.
Right.
Do you want to know the 6 at the college? I can read them off.
No, the city ones were my interest at this point.
That list was put together before I was here, so yeah, I'm just kind of going with that.
Yeah, we talked. Yeah.
We are in desperate need of crosswalks over on Maynard Street with the Wawa that was just built and with the Chick-fil-A coming in.
Yeah.
I would highly recommend if we could potentially move 2 of the city ones over there somehow, way, shape, or form.
Okay.
I would be very interested if we could do that.
Eric,
are you talking?
Sorry, Bill, I didn't mean to interrupt. This is Valerie. I was just going to caution about the rescope on that Arlie grant, especially since it's an older grant and we've already scoped the project to include the crosswalks that Bill mentioned, before we would commit to changing that scope, we would definitely have to check in to see if we can rescope that grant.
Good point.
Understood.
Councilman Biter, we do have one at West Third and Maynard
Yeah.
on that list.
I think, I mean,
Yeah, that's just a bit farther up the street.
Yeah.
well, nobody's going to walk up there, to Eric's point. They are going to cross Maynard Street there. And they probably aren't even going to walk down to the stoplight that we currently have by Sheets, if I had to guess, right, Eric?
I would absolutely agree that they're not going to do that.
Right. That's the problem. But yeah, that was, well, I understand the limitations of this grant, Bill, but that was also somewhat my question that I have felt for a long time. And I know that this will be a challenge, but I thought that this would be a good time to go to PennDOT about this as well. Now that PennDOT is allowing a crosswalk on Washington Boulevard, where I had kind of pushed to have one put. I think we could also use a similar mid-block crosswalk at Willow Street on Market, which is also a PennDOT road. And to Eric's point, the Maynard Street, a mid-block Maynard Street crossing. And I know that it takes a while to get those items, to get concurrence from PennDOT for items like that. Ideally, we would also get funding from PennDOT. But anyway, I think, I'm sure, can we think of any other locations, Eric, where people tend to cross mid-block on a high traffic road? I mean, we have actually the same issue at Church Street and Market Street. I see people crossing there all the time as well.
So on that
Well,
note,
that's true because of those parking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, but that said, I think is going to get super complicated because the highway is spilling off into the city right there. I can't imagine we get approval from PennDOT for that, right, Bill?
at Market at First Church, is that what you're talking about?
No, Market and Church Street.
Oh, I thought you meant at First Church.
The First Church is another potential, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like, I'm sure they would love to have a crosswalk there.
Yeah, we actually met with PennDOT there, and they gave us approval to have us with their own forces install one there at the First Church.
Mm-hmm.
You know how busy that is there with the school across the street and all that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think what we're kind of looking at is Market being a larger street than most streets in the city. Really, if you're going down, there's the park where, I mean, I routinely see 4th through 6th graders from Curtin trying to cross there, you know, trying to cross Market at the park to get home down Hepburn Street. So, but I think, and frankly, even further up on Market Street where they've got like crossing guards at school let out times, there are a bunch of intersections there where there's really not good visibility for pedestrians or for vehicles coming through when there are a bunch of kids trying to get across Market Street. So all the way down Market, really from up there with Grampian, there are probably 8 spots where we could use protected crosswalks. And maybe that's something, maybe at that point, Market Street at least becomes a large enough project that we could look for a grant to try to address it and work with PennDOT in a global way to, you know, if we did a mid-block cross, if we did a crossing at Willow Street, amplified the crossing from that side of like Home and College on Market Street, where we're currently doing work on Woodley Boulevard, because that is a really terrible intersection to get across to. Magnified now because the stoplight's no longer on. But I digress. Anyway, and then try to, anyway, I'd be happy to work on that with you if you wanted to, if we wanted to try to approach PennDOT, if that was valuable. I don't know if that's valuable to have some jerk municipal official get involved.
Leads me into, we just received an SS4A, Safe Streets for All grant, actually last year. That's going to involve basically a pretty large study of pedestrian needs, possibly bicycle needs as well. And all these things that you're mentioning, yeah, we want to know about all this, and we'll incorporate that into that.
Okay, yeah, I mean, that, I think Market Street is a basically completely ignored pedestrian corridor in the city, and then that,
Yeah.
so there's would be some value to acknowledging that. And then to Eric's point, I mean, college students don't listen to much guidance, period. So nobody is going to walk to a corner to cross at a light to get a Wawa sandwich at 2 a.m. Or are they open at 2 a.m.? I don't even know. But so I think those are both valuable.
Liz, I would just add to what Bill said. So we did get the Safe Streets for All planning grant, and we'll be looking at that project coming forward. Also, the city planner that we recently just hired, who will be playing a huge role in that Safe Streets for All planning grant, did just spend quite a significant amount of years as the county's transportation planning supervisor. So he has a significant amount of input into the needs in the city. So Scott will definitely be helping us, and he and I have already discussed applying for a Safe Routes to School grant to try to address some of those issues on Market Street. So I won't put you on the spot in this meeting with all the solutions to all of our problems, but I did just want to mention that those are definitely on our radar currently.
Well, given that we are, I think, looking at kind of a handful of potential bike modifications and the debut of the parks plan, et cetera, maybe we should try to put together a meeting to kind of put our heads together and try and create. And now that we have Scott on board, Valerie, maybe we should try to put together some sort of a meeting just to think in the round about how to improve pedestrian access in the city and bike access, and specifically grant avenues that might be open to us to do that. I know we talked about perhaps trying to, or I had for years at least thought about trying to resolve some of the issues with Graffius Run, partly trying to utilize some safe routes to school sort of things to create a better corridor up Elmira Street that helps to resolve some of the flooding issues as well. There are a handful of different things that we could do there, but anyway, we might be able to make some headway, and now may not be the perfect time to be looking for grant funding, but at least get a couple of ideas around for when we do think that there will be grant funding to be had. Yeah. Anyway, but otherwise, Bill, I am unbelievably excited that we are getting a protected crosswalk at Washington Boulevard. I will start walking through there again. And I just, it has driven me nuts for years that Montoursville has one and we don't. So I'm glad we're there, because I think it is hard. And speaking as somebody who drives a lot more now than I used to, it can be hard to remember when you're in a car that you should yield to pedestrians, especially when they're crossing at a place that's not a designated crosswalk. So I think that this will be a helpful reminder for our citizens that people who are using other modes of transportation on the streets deserve their fair access to the streets as well. And I'm glad to hear that Lycoming is going to make that a reality. Any other questions about the MOU?
I don't have any.
Okay, hearing nothing yet. Like I said, I'm just pleased to hear that we're moving forward on these and hoping
it's great
that with the additional Lycoming College, we will get further with getting a bid. And if we don't, I say we go after Market Street.
That upper part of Market Street where the kids cross, and you have kids from Curtin, kids from Cochrane. There's a lot of
and there's one block where there's actually a crossing guard at school times.
There is, that's.
But there's 2 or 3 blocks where kids are trying to cross, and once again, nobody ever wants to walk an extra block up so that they can cross safely.
When you do the brainstorming, if there's any possibility of getting some flashing lights there while schools are letting out, or when they're going to school, to slow it down, because it's a treacherous, fast corridor there, and people aren't respective of each other. So
and it's really narrow too. I mean, which is a good thing from a pedestrian access standpoint to a certain extent. But the net effect is that people, I think, are too busy sometimes watching out for the other cars because that there's somebody in their lane. And then they're not watching out for kids. And you've got that tight curve coming around the park.
Mhm.
So yeah, there are just a lot of impediments to getting across that street safely. And I do make that trek pretty often with my kids, so I can speak to how terrifying it is to try and get 3 small children across Market Street. But
It's a hazard. It's a
yeah,
hazard for me as well.
yeah, it's true.
Heading
I mean,
over.
you know, and you have people in all walks of life because the park is there. So you might have, you
Yeah.
know, also like older people trying to get to the park to recreate, or
Mhm.
just it's not just kids and it's not just school time, but that's clearly a prime time when we don't want anybody to get hit.
Exactly. Yep.
Anyway,
Okay.
Hal, if we really wanted to get into this, Bill, at some point, did anybody ever send you, Eric, what was that? Was it a TikTok? The guy who'd kind of devised a new way of approaching Confusion Corner,
Oh, wow.
that involved a lot less open space there. We could look for a grant to accomplish that.
Yeah,
I saw that. That was on
yeah.
Facebook.
Okay,
Yeah.
was it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, it was, I think we could look to, I mean, real pie in the sky. And maybe that's the thing, is that you build a pie in the sky approach to Market Street, and then then you scale it back when you don't get the money you're after. So pie in the sky would be to take Confusion Corner and turn it into something with several different mechanisms, larger streets and closing down a bunch of the vehicular area there so that pedestrians are really only crossing 2 lanes of traffic instead of crossing what is effectively 4,
Yeah.
with turning movements and all that. And that would make it a lot safer.
Right.
I know, Scott, that you and I had talked. Scott's also on the school board, and he and I had talked about the fact that the school district's walk distance for schools is 1.5 miles, which is a long way to go. But it's even
Mhm.
longer. It's even longer when you have to cross a number of really dangerous intersections to get to your school from where you're living. And when I was a kid, when I was at Curtin, I was walking up from West Edwin Street here downtown, and crossing at Confusion Corner every day. And that's, that'll shorten your lifespan. If nothing else, the stress level involved in that. So if we could make that safer, I think we would have also increase attendance rates at our schools, because parents would feel safer letting their children do that walk by themselves. Anyway, okay, well, that was a soapbox. Sorry about that. Moving on from this item, before Janice realizes how long I'm dragging this meeting on. Final item on today's agenda is item number 4, resolution of the City Council to approve substantial amendments to the fiscal year 2017 and 2018 annual action plans for the Community Development Block Grant and Home Investment Partnership Program. Okay, Valerie, why are all of your resolutions such a mouthful?
Seriously, I'll blame Jamie Schroeder for that and pass it to her.
Okay, hi, Jamie.
Good afternoon. Thanks. Yeah, everything I do is full of acronyms, but then nobody knows what they mean, so we have to spell it all out. So what we have here today for your consideration is a resolution to do some amendments to 2017 and 2018 annual action plans. 2017, there is home funds that need to be expended by this fall. So the plan is to move the unexpended home funds to Habitat for Humanity so that they can expend them more quickly on their projects. And then same with 2018, there is a bunch of funding that was not ever spent on the home activities, which again, that one would need to be spent by next year in the fall, and we would give that to Habitat as well. The reason for so much funding to Habitat is because they are doing projects and we know they can spend it, and they are aware of this funding and they have a plan in place to be able to use the funding in the time that we have to use it. The other item is for 2018 CDBG funds. There was some funding left in a historic rehab project that is now just being moved into Elm Park as the CDBG project that's been moving forward. So those are the amendments to be considered.
Okay, thank you, Jamie.
You're welcome.
So this does not mark a global change to our home funding approach. This is simply trying to get rid of funds from old budget years, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, I was pleased to see the money being offloaded to Habitat, but I would be sad to think that that was what our home program was turning into, period. So, Randy and Eric, what questions do you have?
The money that's going to go to Habitat, is that designated for some I'm tongue-tied here, for some particular projects that are already underway, or is it just going to be spread out amongst
I believe these
different?
will go to the Scott Street project that's currently going
Okay.
on because they have to be spent so quickly. They're going to go in the current construction projects.
Okay. Is that a couple homes or one or?
They're building a total of 6 and they've completed 2.
Oh.
So our funding will go into the last 4.
Okay.
And
Okay,
Valerie,
great.
Yes.
can I ask a quick question to follow up on that then?
Sure.
Does that mean they've been our designated CHODO, or we've agreed to make them our designated CHODO for a certain period of time, correct?
That's correct.
Does this shorten the period of time for which they will need to be our designated CHODO?
No.
Okay. I mean, I know that sorry, when I say a designated CHODO, I guess I mean we have agreed to give them our CHODO funding for a number of home years in a row, right? And I guess I was merely asking, I know that they are currently the city's only designated CHODO, correct?
That's correct. And we have subrecipient agreements with them for 22, 23, 24, and for some program income funds.
Okay. So they'll continue to receive those, but then perhaps we could look at, if we were to have another active CHODO open up, look at designating funds to a different CHODO at some point relatively soon in the future. Okay.
Yes, very much so.
Okay. Not that I mind, Habitat is doing good work, and I'm not saying that. I'm just trying to. It would be good to get some variety in that game, I think, especially because Habitat has new construction, and it would be great to also see someone doing rehab, I think, in the same vein.
Fully agree.
Okay. Anything else, folks?
I don't.
Okay. It'll be good to get these fiscal years closed out, I guess, huh?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Then thanks very much, Jamie, for sticking around to tell us that stuff. And all right, and yeah, we're excited to see these. We're very excited to see the Habitat project happen and get something on those lots on the Memorial Ave, or off Memorial Ave. Okay, all right. If I hear nothing further on this item, we'll move on to item number 5, which is any related items. Does anyone out there have anything they'd like to introduce for consideration today? Okay. Hearing nothing, I guess it's time for us to bid each other goodbye until Thursday. It was nice to see you all. Bill Scott, thank you for once again putting up with me going wildly off topic on the crosswalk conversation.
No problem.
And I'll see everybody on Thursday. Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Thank
Liz.
you.
Yeah,
Bye.
bye.
Bye.